I recently found myself pondering on what seemed to be a simple question my favorite teacher asked me. What makes an action right and wrong? If you don't think about the question too much, it seems pretty simple enough. But it does raise some more underlying questions beneath it. What makes it right? Who says it's right? And should I play Minecraft again?
Arr. Oh, I did it! No.
Morality. It's such an easy concept to grasp on a surface level, but I found myself amazed on how deep and broad the subject actually is. Morality seems to be subjective enough to give a person a hard time to draw the line between right and wrong, yet commonly accepted enough to be recognized as something that is and should be. So why should you care about the intricacies of morality? Well, being human and conscious gives us the power to have emotions and feelings that can limit our actions. The fact that you have the power to steal a snack from a 7-Eleven or punch that one annoying cousin of yours and still not do it shows that we are bound by our morality and humanity. So, what constitutes as something good or bad? Moral Theory 1. Ethical Subjectivism. Ethical subjectivism is the idea that morality comes from, well, you. You decide what is right and wrong. This isn't that bad of a moral theory since it does give a simple answer to a simple question. You say what is right and what is wrong. Morality is up to you. But the thing is, the problem there is it's highly subjective. See, this theory seems okay when only applied to you. But since you aren't the only human in the world, its lack of criticism raises a lot of problems. Imagine being an ethical subjectivist. You meet a fellow subjectivist, and the person says, "I will punch you because I know it is ethically correct," and proceeds to do so. You, whom I assume did nothing wrong, will dispute this claim. But since you are a moral subjectivist, you are obligated to respect their ethical judgment. And if you claim your ethical beliefs doesn't support this kind of behavior, the person must respect your ethical judgment as well, thus creating a paradox. Since everyone is entitled to their moral ground, a situation where one moral value breaches another is bound to happen. So yeah, ethical subjectivism. Moral Theory 2. Cultural relativism. Think of ethical subjectivism, but rather than having it with one person, it's an entire culture. Despite this moral theory being void of criticism as well, just like ethical subjectivism, it seems to be much more prevalent. Since every culture is entitled to their own beliefs, you cannot say that suicide bombing is evil or arranged marriages are unethical, since this is their culture, not yours. This means that what is sometimes morally correct to your culture may be immoral to another. A good example I recently learned about for this is bride kidnapping in Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, a country somewhere in Central Asia. Basically, a man can gather some of his friends and have them help him kidnap a girl he finds attractive. The girl is then brought to the home of the groom and then will be talked down and convinced by the females of the house while they dress the lady for a ceremony. Some girls would even have significant others, but due to cultural standards of the country, this kind of marriage strategy is acceptable. No. Some of you will probably see that as something immoral and bad since it strips the freedom of choice away from the woman. But cultural relativists will see this as something that they have no right to judge, since it is the moral standard of their culture. Moral Theory 3. ethical egoism. This one is probably one of my favorites out of the 10. Ethical egoism is basically the belief that everyone does everything for their own personal interest. Every action you make will always be for yourself, and egoists don't believe in genuine altruism. Now, this does not mean that egoists believe all humans are evil, but rather just sees themselves first to the very core of the purpose in anything that they are doing. A person who likes helping people a lot may only be doing this because they like the feeling of helping people. Egoists believe that right and wrong is determined by self-interest, and that acting contrary to your self-interest is immoral, since that theory assumes that everything everyone does is for themselves. Now, don't confuse this with psychological egoism, since psychological egoism describes how people actually behave, while ethical egoism tackles how people should behave. It is also important to not confuse self-interest to selfishness, since self-interest is making decision that results the best possible outcome for you, while selfishness is making a decision starving others of a good outcome. An egoist may share some of his food to his hungry neighbor, since he builds relationship and is overall a good outcome for himself, whilst a selfish person will keep the food for himself. Moral Theory 4. Divine Command Theory. This moral theory is probably one of the most famous ones today, at least in my experience. Basically, this theory says that right and wrong is based off God's command, or God's, depending on your religious belief. This moral theory also declares that without religion, there is no morality. An action is right or obligatory if God commands we do it. Wrong if God commands we refrain from doing it. And morally permissible if God does not command it not be done. I believe this is the easiest way to explain morality, since there are a few factors to be dealt with within the theory. Well, actually, only one factor is to be recognized, since that is the divine being. But there is an interesting problem that the theory gives us, actually. The Euthyphro problem. As asked by Socrates, are right actions right because God commanded them, or are right actions commanded by God because they are right? The first choice doesn't seem to be problematic if you don't put too much thought into it, but it kind of eliminates the meaning of morality if everything is right for as long as God commands it. This means that if God commands what is good, then it isn't really much different from God commands what God commands. The second choice isn't any less problematic either. Saying that the action alone is morally right and God only commands it due to its moral nature, then this eliminates the fact that God is omnipotent. Saying that morality exists alone outside of God's power, since He is not the one to decide the ethical value of an action, He simply commands it. Moral Theory 5. Virtue Ethics. Virtue ethics is probably the most straightforward theory, well, at least for me. Virtue ethics basically says be a good person. There is no rule to follow or scriptures to read. Simply having the right intentions and knowing what to do in certain situations will make you into a good person. The golden mean is probably the only rule in virtue ethics. It says that since there are countless amounts of decisions to make and there are countless amounts of variables to consider in each different situation, virtue ethics says that our decisions should always be based off the golden mean. The golden mean is the middle point, the sweet spot, if you will, not excessive or deficient, just right. Let me give you an example. You meet up with a friend and you see just a tiny piece of booger on his face when you saw him. Deficient would be to not tell him at all. excessive, though, would be to insult his whole personality, disregarding his self-esteem and making him want to stay indoors forever. Virtue ethics basically believes that we know what is right naturally as humans. We just simply need to be good people, and the right decisions will come to us. Moral Theory 6. Feminist Ethics. Feminist ethics criticizes all other moral theories to be too masculine, as they see individualism as a masculine idea. They don't like the idea of morality being heavily based off of one thing, whether be it a person or an entire country. So the way feminist ethics determines right and wrong is by seeing themselves along with their social relations. They believe that morality must be based off of moral emotions such as empathy and love. While other moral theories try to determine what is right and wrong within, feminist ethics try to see it in a way where you consider the people around you first. The rule that this moral theory strives through is that to have actions based off of emotions. Let me compare it to virtue ethics to give you a clearer understanding on how feminist ethics differentiates from the other theories. Virtue ethics' goal is to be the most virtuous person you can possibly be, thus having yourself and your moral character be the ultimatum of your decision. Feminist theory bases their decisions off of emotion and what your gut feeling is telling you to do. I do hope this makes a clearer perspective for all of you. Although feminist ethics sounds great and all, since sympathy and love are two very good things to base off your decisions, there can be a problem within social biases. Since emotions is your general bias of deciding whether what is right and wrong, close social relations may have biases over your decisions, since your emotions with someone you know very well is much stronger than a random stranger you saw eating at McDonald's earlier. Moral Theory 7. Utilitarianism. This one is pretty easy to explain actually. It's kinda like the greater good rule, where actions is based off of consequences. Rather than focusing on the intent, you focus on the outcome of your actions. Utilitarians' goal is to have the most happiness out of your decisions. They see happiness as the ultimate goal in life, since utilitarianists believe that humans, to the very root of their actions, goal is to be happy. If you are asked why you study or why you work, why do you want money, why do you want to go to this place, why do you want to follow your parents' orders, they believe that in essence the reason for all of the action is for happiness. I want to finish school because I think it'll make me happy. I want money because it'll make me happy. I want to make my parents happy because it makes me happy. This doesn't mean that utilitarianists only care for their own happiness. No. They see their own happiness as valuable as everyone else's. And since their morality is based off the most happiness as a result of their actions, they are willing to give up their own happiness if it means it makes more happiness to other people. It is also worth noting that there are two types of utilitarianism: rule and act. This moral theory has gone off for too long, honestly, so I'm just gonna leave it that for you guys to search up if you guys want to. Okay, a good example of this is the trolley problem. Okay, imagine 5 people are tied to a track where a trolley is on its way to roll over them. Another person is tied to a similar track to the left of the initial track. You have the access to a lever where you can redirect the direction of the trolley to one person so you can save the other 5 people. So what do? Utilitarianists will say pull the lever, as to save 5 people despite sacrificing one. But this sort of puts blood on your hands, since you willingly killed that one person. And some would say that this kind of thinking is immoral. Enter Moral Theory 8. Kantian theory. Also known as Kantianism, coined by Immanuel Kant, He believed that we have two types of decisions in life: hypothetical imperatives and categorical imperatives. Let's call them hypos and cats for short. Hypos are decisions that isn't really based off morality but more of pleasure. These decisions are okay whichever action you choose. Examples would be: I ate a burger instead of a hot dog since I like burgers. Cats are decisions that are based off morality. And for Kant, morality is something that is constant. He didn't like the idea of morality being bound by religion. He believed that morality has a universal rule that should not be broken. So, how does this work, you ask? Well, Kant believes that morality is universal, meaning if an action is wrong at one situation, he believes that it's wrong in all situations. And by doing this certain action, you say that everyone should be doing this action at every situation. So for him, he doesn't really care about the outcome nor the intention. A husband and wife are chilling at their home when they hear a sudden knock on the door. The wife gets it and meets a scary man with a gun. The man says, "I am here to kill your husband. Is he here?" Now, the obvious decision here is for the wife to lie about his husband being there to save his life. But for Kantianism, since lying is inherently bad, the morally correct action there is to either be honest or to not say anything. Since for Kant, lying in that situation is the same as saying everyone should lie all the time, which is bad. So yeah, universalizability principle. Try to search it up. This part's gone for way too long. Moral Theory 9. Rights-based theory. Rights-based theory is all about respecting other people's rights. For as long as your action respects others' rights, it is morally acceptable. So let's define rights even better to give a better understanding on this moral theory. Rights are basically things you automatically have as a human. They are things that you're entitled to. That means no one else should be able to stop you from experiencing the luxury of your rights. There are three types of rights: legal rights, human/moral rights, and contractual rights. And here are some examples for these types of rights. Next is the importance of the difference of rights and duties. Rights is something a person is entitled to, something you have because you are a human being. Duties, on the other hand, are things you are obligated to do. A good relationship example would be a student and a teacher. The student has a right to good education services from the teacher, and the teacher has the obligation to teach the student good education. The major flaw, however, in rights-based theory is that it fails to provide a hierarchy of rights, thus having contradictory situations where one breaches another. For example, Michael has the moral right to free speech, so he can openly believe Jackson is an incompetent waste of space to society. But that breaches Jackson's legal right to not be discriminated against. Last and definitely not the least, Contractarianism. Coined by Thomas Hobbes, he believed that morality isn't within us or natural even. Instead, he believed that it only comes when free, rational, and self-interested people live together. Since we are all free people, we have the power to do whatever we want. And since we are all rational people, we decide to trade in a portion of our freedom for security. Let me explain. Imagine I had a guitar and you had a piano. I play my guitar and you play your piano, but sometimes we get tired of our instruments and we want to play other instruments. Instead of having anarchy and having us try to steal each other's instrument, we come to an agreement, an invisible contract perhaps. We get to trade instruments twice a week, In a way, we trade our freedom to have our own instruments ready for us all the time, to have to be able to experience someone else's instrument. This is what we call an explicit contract. Implicit contracts, though, on the other hand, are just things that are by default that you have to abide to. Think of like traffic laws that you never really agreed to anyone that you are to follow these rules. But the fact that you reap the benefits from the system of having traffic laws, you are bound to an implicit contract to follow these rules. The downside, though, to this moral theory is it heavily relies on trust and cooperation. Since a lot of these contracts that we have are implicit, we can't really guarantee that everyone who is part of the system is going to abide to our contract. The big difference Contractarianism has against other moral theories is that there is no morality. It only exists when once we agree that it does or should. This also means that morality can change. So if the people within the system changes their mind about a certain moral belief, morality changes as well.